May 2024, things went from like bad to worse. I thought it was as bad as it could get, but things got a lot worse in May 2024 because on May 1st, the media articles hit, and just again, I went into a depression. And NBC Boston and just big articles. MSN picked it up. So my mugshots everywhere and stuff. And then later that day, somebody had told my neighbors about this because a few neighbors called and had me trespassed from their property. So police came to my house again May 1st in the evening saying, don't go on your neighbor's property, you'll be arrested. And I'm like, okay, I don't go on neighbor's property really. But then the next day, I think May 2nd, I got a call and an email from the Department of Safety suspending my paramedic license. And it was a weird letter. It said, you've been found to be in violation of RSA 541. Something like that. And I'm like, what do you mean found in violation? I'm not a lawyer, but that is like saying I've been found guilty. And unless I slept through a trial, I've never been found guilty of anything ever.
Buy my novel, Escape from the Village, from major booksellers online. Go to escapevillage.com. Subscribe to the Substack. Go to fountainheadforum.substack.com. Support the forum. Go to buymeacoffee.com/fountainheadforum. Thank you. The opinions and attitudes expressed by guests on the Fountainhead Forum do not necessarily reflect the opinions and attitudes of the Fountainhead Forum or the opinions and attitudes of Chris Baker. Welcome to the Party Pal. This is Fountainhead Forum 415. I recorded this show a while back, but because it involves a pending case, I wanted to put it on the shelf for a while to make sure it was okay, so I'm airing it now. This is my talk with Alu Axelman. Alu lives in the free state of New Hampshire, and he has authored several books. He's also married and has at least one child, I believe, right, Alu? That's
correct.
Yeah. Some of your books include Corona Fascism, The Pocket Guide to Killing Gun Control, Presumed Guilty, Delayed and Denied, and you've been very busy, Alu. Wow.
Yes, sir.
Good for you. Yeah, I am impressed. You're gonna get up to Tom by the time you're 90. You'll be up at Tom. You'll be way past Thomas Sowell. So anyway, I brought Alu on here to talk about a recent incident involving him and a false accusation. So we're going to go over that. So first of all, Alu, I do want to ask, how did you become a libertarian?
I was raised conservative by pretty average conservative parents who believed in freedom and limited government, but also at the same time respected authority and taught me to respect authority and always respect police and the government pretty much. But pretty much 2016, the primaries with Trump, Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, Rubio, and all of them, I started paying attention more and liking a lot of things I heard from Ted Cruz and Rand Paul and some things from Trump. The libertarian things stuck with me. They kind of piqued my interest, and I started following more. I was living in New York City at the time under Mayor de Blasio and dictator Andrew Cuomo, and de Blasio and Cuomo pushed me toward being more libertarian with their constant tax increases, surveillance state, more cameras being put up, and restrictions and taxes and all that stuff. So they really pushed me to be libertarian. At the same time, I was following mostly Ted Cruz's campaign, but certainly liking some of the things that Rand Paul was saying. I barely knew what libertarian meant at the time, but I thought he sounded pretty weird in some weird, good and bad ways. He had a weird personality, which again, like all libertarians seem to. And I started following politics more and more and got involved with the local Libertarian Party in New York, although it was very little and weak, and started researching in 2016 and 2017 whether I could move, because New York was the least free place, but also I couldn't afford a house anyway if I moved out from my parents' house. And I looked all over and found Wyoming, and I decided to move to Wyoming. And went to my girlfriend, who's now my wife, Kate, and I said, hey, Wyoming looks like the freest state. And she said, no, we can't do that. We can't go all the way to the Rockies. It's too far from my parents, and is there anywhere we could move closer? So I looked again, and I finally found New Hampshire, and realized it had, seemingly the most freedom, of any state. And then I went back to her and she said, yeah, that's definitely close enough. So I moved to New Hampshire. But correction, in the intro, you said I live in New Hampshire. I moved to Virginia a year ago. And then we'll get into that with this whole case. Essentially the reason we moved a year ago, and now we're doing well in Virginia. So yeah, that's the basic synopsis of becoming libertarian. I started a radio show. I was doing talk radio weekly in Southwest Connecticut by New York in Greenwich throughout 2017 till I moved. And that became the Liberty Block podcast. So the podcast has been going since then, since 2017.
Okay, so let's talk about this case. When did this? There was an alleged incident, and first of all, when let's go back to the date that this alleged incident occurred. What were you doing? What was happening that day?
Oh yeah, in June 2022, I was at PorkFest, which is true. At PorkFest, I allegedly assaulted someone, which was not true. And the first time I heard about that allegation was over a year later in August 2023. So that's when this nightmare started for me.
So did you know this person at all?
Yep.
Had you spoken to them or?
Yeah, I'd spoken to her a few times. It was a daughter of a friend.
Yes.
I think because of pending, the criminal case is over, because of future possible proceedings, I'll try not to say the name and stuff and
I wouldn't say the name either.
Yeah. Pretty much everyone knows. Those who know, they know. But yeah, I was decently close friends with a person, and I knew her husband and her kids. So I've spoken to them a little bit in the past.
And so I don't know. So what was the can you be a little more detailed about when they said assault, what did that mean?
Yeah, so I didn't know until what I saw in the paperwork in the discovery from the state was they alleged that I kissed her or tried to kiss her on the neck, and they alleged that I had her sit on my lap and held her down with force. So hence the false imprisonment charge and the assault and sexual assault. That was the alleged conduct in the state's discovery.
And these people were your friends, and how long had you known these people?
I knew primarily the mother for a year or two, maybe 3. Yeah. Prior to that, probably since 2019 or 2020.
Well, without giving out too much, are they also in New Hampshire, or were they traveling for PorkFest?
Yeah, also in New Hampshire.
Okay, so I don't know, and I guess they probably consider themselves free staters, but who knows? Anyway, so you don't find out about this until a year later. So then what happens from there?
Yeah, crazy, and none of this is going to be believable. But I have all the evidence and stuff. Pretty much, there could be other felony liability for the people. Essentially, they came to me initially. I heard about it when the parents came to me and said, "You assaulted our daughter a year ago. She just told us now, but you did it a year ago, and give us $20,000 for her therapy. Otherwise, we're going to report you to the police for this." So I was shocked and scared because he did this in person. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Right away, even though I was pretty shocked and just taken aback, I recognized it as extortion, which I later looked at the statute, and it did seem to match what would be a felony extortion in New Hampshire, which is 20 years in prison. And yeah, I don't know if I want to go into all the details of that exact incident, because there could be the future prosecution for that felony, because that was the big one, the attempted extortion, conspiracy to commit extortion with them and another person who I also thought was a friend. But they said, sign here on my laptop, and essentially a confession to the assault as we described it. And the conditions would be you have to go to alcohol and sexual rehab and treatment and admit publicly to the exact incident you did to a 14-year-old, assaulted them, and pay us $20,000 for her therapy and stuff. So right away, I saw it as extortion. And he had me type, he wanted me to type my name on the laptop as like a signature confession. And he signed it. I believe he signed that document with his own signature, as did the witness that he had there to essentially be a witness to my confession, or so he thought. And then they brought that document, they printed out that PDF and brought that to the police where the incident allegedly occurred. And then 6 weeks later, the prosecutor brought misdemeanor charges against me. And of course, as they tend to do, it was 7 misdemeanor charges. And in the paperwork they sent over, me and all my lawyers were not clear how they got 7 charges out of the alleged conduct, even assuming everything she said was correct, even if the allegation was true. But in the intervening time, as they went to police in August, this is early August 2023, they simultaneously filed restraining order, which in New Hampshire, we can get into that. In New Hampshire, anyone can file a restraining order. I know I've heard from others, some states, you have to be a spouse or something or living with a person. Yeah. In New Hampshire, any person in the universe can file a restraining order. And like in many states, they're all granted ex parte, meaning without a hearing with the defendant party.
Yeah. In fact, Alu, this is even getting to the point where, and I talked to a lady last Friday that they're actually, that you can actually file a restraining order against somebody who supports your political opponents. So if you're running for office, you can file a restraining order against the people who are voting for the other candidate. But I don't want to go into that. But yeah, as you pointed out, it's easy to file a restraining order, which can definitely open up a can of worms. When I assume that after this attempt, is that when you first contacted a lawyer yourself?
Yeah, exactly. So right after that attempted extortion, I was still scared. I was just shocked. And I called a few friends who I trusted who were police and who were lawyers. The lawyers I spoke to said not to go to the police yet, even though I kind of wanted to for the extortion, and get up in front of it in case they went to police also. And I hired a lawyer a few days later, I believe. But yeah, didn't tell police. He told me not to. And there were no charges yet. He said he would get in contact with the prosecutor and try to head off any charges, but he did not. So that was unfortunate because it was 6 weeks, and I just didn't know how much he worked to speak. He never spoke to the prosecutor. He said he couldn't get in touch with her. So 6 weeks later, I was on my honeymoon, finally, that I took years late because of COVID. So we took our honeymoon like 3 years after we got married. And on the way back, or while I was still there in Germany, I got a text from my lawyer saying there were charges filed and they're all misdemeanors. So getting back into the country with passport control, there was like a bit of a hiccup where I guess my passport flagged for a pending charge or warrant for a criminal charge. And they took me to a room for a few minutes and then let me go. So that was also just another scary part of the saga.
This was coming back into the U.S.?
Yep.
Even though you're an American citizen?
Yep, because when the passports are scanned nowadays, they have barcodes. Something flagged probably that had like a warrant for my arrest or something. This was in JFK, New York. So like an armed CBP guy or something, some kind of federal agent told me to follow him. So I'm like shitting bricks, going to the small room by the airport with the other criminals. And I sat there for a few minutes. My wife was like freaking out because she had already gone toward the luggage. So I was separated from her. And then like 5 minutes later, they just called me up and looked at my passport and said, you're free to go. So that was pretty interesting. It's really interesting that this happened while you were out of the country. I wonder when you're on your honeymoon and you came home early because of this, or no, we planned. Okay. This was like the last day or second to last day. Okay. We had a flight planned, and I texted my lawyer back saying, please like tell the local police department I'll turn myself in like Monday morning. I'm out of the country. Don't freak out and like go to my house and like try to break in or blow it up or send out international warrants. Like I'll turn myself in. I'm on a flight risk. I like a family and a medic job and stuff. Like I'll be there Monday morning when I get back. I was getting back like late Sunday night. to New York and had to drive to New Hampshire. So I told them anyway. I called the police department and said I'll turn myself in like Monday morning, which I did.
So then what happened? So you went down to the police department. Where is this? What city?
This was Hooksett, my town police department. It was relatively painless considering I was like in and out of the station within an hour. They just did like fingerprints, put me in a cell, took pictures, put me in a cell, waited a few minutes for the bail commissioner, a bail person who works for the state came out in a few minutes. And that's when I saw the charges, 'cause until this time, and this is already like September 26th or something, end of September. So like 6 weeks since the accusation was made to me. I finally looked at the paper that the bail commissioner brought to the police station, and it said like 7 charges. And it said 4 counts sexual assault, 2 counts simple assault, 1 count false imprisonment. And that was pretty crazy to see on paper, like 7 misdemeanors. And they all said class A. And I knew from a little bit of like activism in the legislature and stuff that class A misdemeanor meant a year in jail for the maximum. So I'm like 7 times 1, that's like 7 years technically that I was like facing. I knew most people don't really get that, but like technically facing 7 potential 1-year sentences of incarceration. And I'm not sure if I knew about the sex offender registry requirement at that point, but even just the 7 years facing that was pretty wild.
It almost, Alu, it almost seems like they try to overcharge people so that they can negotiate them down. So they'll throw 7 charges at you, but then they'll say, well, but if you plea bargain with us, we'll only give you 2 or something like that. I don't know what the nature of this is, and it's.
Yeah, I don't think anyone disputes that. I think everyone knows, even prosecutors probably admit they overcharge, and that way they can meet in the middle point to bargain. And yeah, I mean, even reading, so I saw like all the official discovery, all the state's evidence they plan to bring, which they didn't have any evidence, just their accusation and that crazy alleged signed document, extortion document. But I couldn't find anything in any of the complaints from the accuser or anyone that would justify 7 charges. The alleged conduct that she claimed was like 2 things, like kissing and sitting on a lap. So even if both of those are separate acts, legally speaking, that's like 2 counts assault or sexual assault, but 4 counts sexual assault, 2 counts simple assault and false imprisonment, 7 charges. Literally, the lawyers I had and other people I had look at it literally could not understand how they charged with 4, and they're like, we can motion to dismiss like 2 or 3 of them of those charges. But another issue with the charges was that the statute of limitations in New Hampshire for Class A misdemeanors is 12 months, and this was filed. They only went to the police after 12 months, after 13 months, so it was beyond the statute of limitations for misdemeanors. Now, I had a lawyer initially. It seems like I had to kind of do this work to figure out this stuff. So I would tell all your listeners to definitely, even if you hire a lawyer, public defender, private lawyer, whoever it is, even if they have a great reputation, I would say feel free to do your own research, advocate for yourself, and if you find something, it's possible your lawyer didn't find it, overlooked it, or is busy or something, or missed it. I would email him because it can't hurt, and it might actually help your case a lot. So I did a lot of research because I want to be a lawyer anyway. And I was interested in, not being convicted for a crime I didn't commit. So I found that the statute of limitations for Class A misdemeanors in New Hampshire is 12 months, and it was filed like 13 months after the alleged incident. So they're time barred, meaning they cannot be prosecuted. But there's an exception. There's one exception in the legislature, in the statute in New Hampshire. It's for sexual assault against a minor, allegedly. So those charges can be brought until the accuser turns 40. So that's bad, but still the 3 other charges, the simple assault and false imprisonment, should have been dismissed immediately, and they shouldn't have been filed, because one could assume a prosecutor or judge, whoever signs off on the charges, would know the statute of limitations. So they should not have been brought. And I think that's one of the many issues where there's prosecutorial discretion issues, or maybe even misconduct in the case of bringing those charges.
Yeah, and I wouldn't want a 1-year time limit on kids filing charges for something like this, because you don't know what kind of they may not be able to file charges until they are adults. Although I think going to the age of 40 seems like
a stretch, but so you end up so how much time did you spend at the police station on that day?
Well, I was in and out in like an hour.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to get a hold out here, Alu, is what did this cost you? You know, in time and money. Even though you didn't do anything. So, had you had any contact with these people between the date of the allegation and the date of the accusation?
Oh yeah. Well, that's another interesting part. I'll get back to the cost later. Many thousands of dollars and 2 years lost income, so like 150, 200 grand, and you know, infinite stress and balding and graying of hair, just the stress of it. Losing my paramedic license and stuff like that. So
losing your what license?
What's that?
Losing your what license?
Paramedic.
Oh.
Yep. Yeah, I'll get to that. That's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
Not as important as the criminal aspect, but yeah, that's another important thing. So yeah, the interesting thing, one of the many reasons I was confident going to trial, and I wanted a speedy trial, and I invoked that motion many times. And I do want to discuss that because New Hampshire has no right to a speedy trial for misdemeanors. So I could have waited forever. So I waited 2 years. But I invoked speedy trial right away. I wanted a trial. One of the many reasons I was confident, I had the truth on my side and they had no evidence. But also in the time between June 2022, where I allegedly did this assault, and August 2023, I had seen the whole family at least 3 times, I think. Like the mother, father, daughters, including the accuser, who was one of the daughters. I had like seen them at events, and when they come to events, like they all like give me a hug and stuff. So at least 3 times this has happened in the intervening time, and there are like people around the public place. People see this, and we were friends, and like them, the accuser. Nobody else was like afraid of me or felt any kind of negative way or anything like that. So that's another reason why it was so shocking, because like I was friends with parents, and like all of me and other parents of kids, I'm friends with them and their kids. So that was another thing that was pretty crazy about this accusation.
So people witnessed you being on friendly terms with these people.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, it's just like public events.
Yeah,
like I remember tossing a football at the Pine Tree riot. This would be April 2023.
Yeah.
Like tossing a football around with a bunch of people, and one of them was this daughter, who then a few months later accused me. And I remember thinking like she was throwing the football like fairly well for a girl. And like, so I remember like playing football. There were a lot of pictures. I don't know if there were pictures of that. There was a picture at that event of her holding my baby. So like there was that picture. I don't know about the football, but so I remember that event and a few other events, like pretty public. Pine Tree Riot had hundreds of people there. So yeah, throughout 2023, a bunch of events and yeah, just crazy. It was hard to imagine.
Yeah. So what happened after that first day at the police station?
So I was in and out quickly. It was a PR bail, so I didn't have to pay any bail, just like the $40 or $20 fee for the bail commissioner to come down. And then a few weeks later, they sent me that packet of discovery with all the evidence. Essentially, they set a trial date or arraignment date, which my lawyer waived as I pled not guilty, obviously. They set a trial date for December of 2023. By then, I'd already had a public defender. And he had a jury trial scheduled for the same day of the trial. And according to state law, a jury trial takes precedence. So he made a motion to ask the court to move it to a different day before or after that day, because he was busy in jury trial the day the December trial was supposed to happen. So they moved it to a few months later. And then we had made a motion to get some more evidence, because apparently, according to the parents, this girl had made a very similar accusation in the past that was also not like founded on evidence. So essentially unsubstantiated. I don't want to say false, because I'm not 100% sure it was false, but that's, it seemed to have no evidence and nothing happened with it. So we wanted to get info on that and see if there was a report and see if we can ask about that or ask the supposed assailant in the other case. So we made that motion, and by May, I think like 3, 4, 5 months later, the motion was still not even ruled on, and then they had to go to like DCYF to try to get records or something. So the trial was postponed again till summer or fall of 2024. Then
what's DCYF?
The it's like CPS in New Hampshire, the Division of Children, Youth, and Families, I believe.
Okay.
And that, so if she had made an allegation in the past, I think that interview and allegation documentation would be in DCYF. And so we asked the state to get that for us, and they said it would take a while. And I think they did. Yeah, I think that was the holdup for a few months throughout middle of 2024. And then we made a motion so this whole time I was invoking speedy trial as well. And then the trial was scheduled for, I could pull it up here. I have it somewhere, like the whole timeline. But there was a trial scheduled for November 15th. And then because we had made a few other motions, like pretty standard pre-trial motions, like to dismiss the simple assault charges that were time barred by the SOL, and a few other motions to exclude that supposed confession contract thing that was signed, as it was coerced and criminal activity. And the judge found that what they did was felony extortion. So the judge, saw that it was, certainly could be prosecuted that way. So as a courtesy, he appointed counsel to essentially all of the state's witnesses, which would be like the parents and their friends and stuff who did the extortion. Apparently in New Hampshire, they get appointed at taxpayer expense, a free criminal defense lawyer. It could be the state. In this case, they contracted with private defense lawyers. So they hired these people for the witnesses just to counsel them on their Fifth Amendment right to plead the Fifth, to not incriminate themselves. So the judge, it wasn't just me saying that, the judge agreed, like it certainly looked like felony extortion. And the lawyers seemingly advised those witnesses to plead the Fifth and not testify on the stand at trial against me, because they would be further implicating themselves in a felony extortion, which, like I said, is 20 years in prison. And all of them, except for one, did take their lawyer's advice seemingly. And they told the judge, this is already 2025 when the hearing happened. They told the judge they would plead the Fifth and they would not testify at trial, because they knew what they did was like textbook extortion. And I read the law. The statute is pretty wide open. It's pretty clear that if they testified, they would further make themselves liable for that extortion. So everyone except one told them they wouldn't even testify at trial. And so that was November 15th. There was a trial scheduled. It was turned into a motions hearing because of the motions after like 6 months was still not even addressed by the court because they're slow. And then November 15th, instead of the hearing happening, as I was driving up to New Hampshire, I got a text from my lawyer, I think. My lawyer said that the judge had an emergency and have to cancel. So they canceled the hearing. They then postponed it to, I think, February. So for November, they said, all right, we'll have the motion hearing in February. Then they postponed that again because the prosecutor went on vacation, I think. So she made a motion. So they postponed it another month for her vacation over my objection. Of course, I objected to that motion. Yeah. So just right there, that's another 4 months right there, just because the judge and prosecutor have emergencies or vacations. So
yeah, this is so wild. Sometimes I'll schedule a show with somebody and they'll say I can't make it. Well, we do a show 2 or 3 days later, and it seems like every time you get postponed at least a month. That would drive me nuts.
Yeah, it was driving me pretty nuts. That's why I wrote that short book about speedy trial, delayed and denied. Yeah. So during this whole time, as it gets further toward 2 years, so remember, I was planning to apply to law school in the fall of 2024, and that way I would start in like August 2025, which would have been a few months ago already. But because with pending charges, you have to disclose it on applications, and also nobody's going to accept a student who may not be able to matriculate. So no law school would accept someone with pending charges. So I have to wait another year. So I'm already late. I was already 31. Now I'm 32. I have to wait another year before applying to law school. So that's another harm that can't really be quantified. So anyway, whenever they reschedule things, regardless of what the reason was, and it was always their fault, I didn't motion to delay any trial. They would schedule it 1 or 2 or 3 months away in the future. So these are big chunks. Taking a big leap of 3-4 months at a time, it adds up to years. So in March, we finally had a hearing, first time in like a year, in March 2025, and that's where like all the state's witnesses except one told the judge through their attorney that they would plead the Fifth. They would not testify at trial because they were afraid of the felony prosecution. And at the trial, the other things weren't really addressed. The admissibility of that coerced document, that evidence, that was not addressed by the judge. And I think there was something else that was not addressed by the judge. So I didn't feel great after the trial because most of my motions were not even talked about by the judge. But then they said, then a few weeks later on the motion to dismiss, we finally had a hearing on a motion to dismiss at this point, just primarily for violation of speedy trial. Because if my speedy trial is violated, it should be dismissed. So later in March, we had that hearing, and the judge, this is already a new judge. It's been going for so many years. We have a new judge already. So the second one says, we're not going to approve the motion to dismiss based on speedy trial, but the trial has to happen, I think he said, no later than July. So then a few months later, the court officially scheduled the trial for July. So this is already a little over 2 years since June 2023. So it's scheduled for July 2025. And the judge said, he wrote in the motion, in the decision, no more postponements. It has to happen by July. And another concurrent issue, because there are a lot of issues. I didn't even write this down. But there was a big Brady violation. One of the...
A big what violation?
So under like United States versus Brady or something, a federal court case, or Brady versus Maryland, the prosecution, the state has to disclose all evidence, especially exculpatory evidence that would tend to make the defendant look more innocent. They have to disclose any evidence they might have, and they have to actually look for it and find it and then give it to the defendant to make it fair. And they had a big piece of this. It would be essentially fatal to their case, and they refused to give it to me, which is like such a big issue that people get in contempt and like disbarred and stuff for this, but that didn't happen. But pretty much what the evidence was the accuser's friend, who she was with at the time, apparently had told police in the initial investigation in 2023. And I saw this in the documentation they sent me, because they sent me everything. He said that he was with her the whole time and was not separated from her at all. And this covers the entire time from before and after where the alleged incident would have occurred. But so we had his first name, but we didn't have his contact info. So what would have to happen is my lawyer would issue him a subpoena to come testify at trial. But we can't issue him a subpoena to come testify in my case if we don't have his address or phone number or anything. And it was all redacted. So when they sent me everything, it was all covered in black. And this happens. So we make a formal motion, and my lawyer asked the prosecutor unofficially when he spoke to her, but also in motions in the court throughout, to unredact the name so we can have his info, to send him a subpoena by mail. Because it has to be by mail or in person by sending someone to their house. And they refused for like 2 years. The prosecutor never did it. So one of the things that the judge addressed when he heard about this in March 2025, and he wrote, the trial has to happen no later than July because the speedy trial issue after 2 years is becoming an issue. And also the state must share this exculpatory evidence in the form of this witness, his contact info, with the defense. And even 4 months later in July, the prosecutor never sent me anything, never shared the info, never unredacted it.
Yeah.
So it's violating Brady and also violating a direct court order to turn over the info to us. So that was another big issue. And that's another reason why it was ultimately dismissed, because the prosecution they had nothing, they did nothing, they refused to turn over exculpatory evidence, which is like a massive crime for prosecutors, at least like procedurally speaking, and contempt of court could be for violating that order.
This all really makes me wonder a lot about the behavior of prosecutors in general. And I wasn't sure about the whole evidence thing, but for example, basically if somebody accuses you of robbing a bank, and you were actually at Sam's Pizza Place, and somebody took you a picture of you at Sam's Pizza Place, and the prosecutor has that, they have to give you that picture because it clears you, because you were at Sam's Pizza Place and not robbing the bank. But so I got to ask too, what was the media coverage? Was there any media coverage, and what was just the fallout for you, outside of legal? Because you mentioned you lost your paramedic license. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. There was no media coverage until May 2024, when somebody, it wasn't me or anyone on my side, somebody went to media, and I think the first one was Patch. I shouldn't give them any more notoriety, but I think one and then a second article and then a third article, or at least 3 or 4, all on May 1st, 2024, I believe, that the media picked up on. And then I think within a day, by the second, NBC Boston wrote an article about it as well, because they figured it was newsworthy because I was a former candidate for state rep in New Hampshire, which anybody who knows New Hampshire, the House has 400 seats.
Yes.
So including primaries, there are like thousands of people who run every year, and the state only has 1.4 million people. So being a candidate for a state rep, I was never a state rep. Being a candidate means nothing. It means you're part of like 10% of the population who's politically active. But they use that.
Bring all those books, and you're a free stater too, Alu. Yes.
Yeah. So again, I don't know if I'm that noteworthy, like a celebrity as far as like that famous, but I think the story, I guess, was enough for them to publish. They thought I was active enough in the political scene and maybe author stuff that they published it. NBC Boston's article is not too terrible. It said allegedly, arrested for these charges, but still mugshot and everything and the charges, it looks really, really, really bad. So that we didn't even talk about the restraining order a lot, but when the initial accuser filed the restraining order as well as going to the police in August 2023, what happens in New Hampshire is under RSA 174 or 173 and RSA 633, anyone can file charges. They're all approved by judges, I believe 100% of the time. I've never seen anyone not be approved. Ex parte, meaning without the defendant getting notice or opportunity to defend themselves. Police go to their house, they serve the warrant, they say, do you have any guns or ammo? And they take them all by force. So this is all with zero due process at all. And the order itself is not approved based on like a high level of evidence. In fact, it's zero. They don't need to provide any evidence or even make an allegation. And I could read the restraining order affidavit from the accuser to you. It literally says nothing. It says, I want a restraining order. It doesn't even allege that I even did any assault. But they're all approved. And they say, well, it's okay because in 10 days or whatever, you'll get a hearing and then you can defend yourself. But the cops already came to my house and abused me for 3 hours and stole like tens of thousands of dollars worth of property that I cherish and certain kind of property that keeps me very safe and feeling secure, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
So that's a lot of value they took from me. And because I was also out of a job, that's value that I could have used to like sell and buy baby formula for my baby. So I didn't have a job. I couldn't earn a living at the time. Thankfully, my wife could earn a living. Thankfully, I had family who I borrowed. I did borrow a lot of money from my family during those 2 years. But others in similar circumstance who lose their job because of an allegation like this, and they lose essentially their biggest asset, which was for me, my firearms and ammo collection. I couldn't even sell it. I would have sold it and bought food for my wife and son and me, but I couldn't. So like other people could have actually had a starvation kind of issue, an issue paying the mortgage. Like thankfully I survived, but I now owe a lot of money to family. But that's another issue of no due process. And yet my first, second, fourth, fifth amendment was violated. And the First Amendment was violated because in the restraining order, it says you cannot go within 1,000 feet of anywhere the accuser or their family may be. And where they may be is the State House and a lot of Republican liberty events. So I was barred for those 2 years. I was barred from essentially all political activities, which is a huge First Amendment violation as well.
Yeah.
Which I want to work on in the legislature. Because that's another big issue. Because with the restraining orders, there's standard boxes of, they call it relief, but it's really punishments for the defendant.
Yeah.
The judge can check those boxes, but they can also free write in a space anything. So they wrote, don't go within 1,000 feet of them, which is fairly standard, but it could have been more, could have been less. So that's one more thing for people, if they get a restraining order, keep in mind. It might bar you from going to certain places or in general from being within 1,000 or 10,000 feet of any person. And it barred contact, which makes sense, and I agree with. I didn't want to contact them, but also third-party contact, which it defined as through any other person. So if I told a friend, hey, this is BS, and they told the accuser he thinks this is BS, that could be construed as third-party contact because I told someone who then told them something, and that's a violation of the order, which is another crime. It's another year in jail, I believe. So it's just a lot of interesting First Amendment issues as well as Second and Fourth and Fifth Amendment issues.
Well, obviously, I think you need a certain, you certainly need restraining orders. But for example, what happens if you go out to the grocery store and they just happen to be at the grocery store?
I've asked a few lawyers and cops about it. They said that's okay as long as I run away as soon as I notice they're there.
But it still makes it very hard to live. I mean, really, the only solution you have is to get out of town. Really, I mean, I can understand, you're not allowed to go to by their house, maybe their family's houses, and maybe you're not allowed to go to the school or the place where they work. But yeah, it's when you're just going, and especially there's just random places, And so, and you lost your paramedic license. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So May 2024, things went from like bad to worse. I thought it was as bad as it could get, but things got a lot worse in May 2024 because on May 1st, the media articles hit, and just again, I went into a depression. And NBC Boston and just big articles. MSN picked it up. So my mugshots everywhere and stuff. And then later that day, somebody had told my neighbors about this because a few neighbors called and had me trespassed from their property. So police came to my house again May 1st in the evening saying, don't go on your neighbor's property, you'll be arrested. And I'm like, okay, I don't go on neighbor's property really. But then the next day, I think May 2nd, I got a call and an email from the Department of Safety suspending my paramedic license. And it was a weird letter. It said, you've been found to be in violation of RSA 541, something like that. And I'm like, what do you mean found in violation? I'm not a lawyer, but that is like saying I've been found guilty. And unless I slept through a trial, I've never been found guilty of anything ever. So you can't say that. That's not right. And they said they're taking my license. But again, there's no hearing, but it's okay because I'll get a hearing in 10 days where I can defend myself and convince the commissioner of the Department of Safety to reverse the suspension.
Is there a paramedics union or anything like that could have defended you? Was there anybody else trying to fight for you in all this or not?
I mean, family, friends. Most of my friends were supportive because the allegation was just so ludicrous. Pretty much everyone in the community, except like 1 or 2%, were supportive of me. But as far as the real fighting and advocacy, it was me, my family, my lawyers, somewhat. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. There's no union, and I don't have a union at my company, but anyway, this wasn't really a company issue. My company was fine. I told them I'll take a leave of absence. And then they said, if you're charged with this kind of crime, then we're not going to have you on the ambulance anyway. So then I was essentially suspended. But before that, I had taken a leave of absence anyway to deal with this when the allegation first happened. Yeah. But I don't have a union. But anyway, as far as the state, there's no like association. I mean, I'm part of NAEMT, the National Associations of EMTs, but I don't know if that's something they would do. But anyway, I wasn't going to adjudicate it in the administrative courts of the DOS for the license while dealing with the criminal case, which is way more important. I had to focus on that, and I didn't want to say anything that could, jeopardize my case or affect it anyway at that hearing if it would affect the criminal trial. So I told them, fine, suspend the license. I'm not working anyway for now because my employer essentially suspended me based on the allegation. But the DOS, I have another issue with that I'm dealing with right now, actually. I still have hearings trying to get it annulled. The Department of Safety controls the EMS Bureau, and they essentially found me guilty of a crime, saying I violated RSA 541, which is a state law. So I committed a crime because the only allegation they made, not that I hurt a patient as a medic or anything, or anyone complained about me or anything. The sole basis of the suspension of the license was I've been charged with a misdemeanor. So the fact that I was charged with a misdemeanor, which I don't dispute, I was charged, it's true. So they said at a hearing you can dispute it, and I said, can I dispute the substance of the underlying allegation, like the conduct of I didn't assault anyone, didn't kiss anyone? Yeah. And they said no, we just because the fact that there was a misdemeanor charge filed, that is all the evidence we need to suspend your license. And I said I don't dispute it. So that's another reason I didn't have a hearing, because I said if a misdemeanor charge is sufficient to suspend a license, I can't dispute that because the charge exists. So I can't dispute that it exists. So that was interesting. So, but now I just want to get it annulled because since the DOS admitted it was unfounded and everything, I want it annulled so I can apply to law school and not have a paramedic license suspension on my record. So, but they don't know what annulled means. And I'm trying to explain to all the lawyers at DOS what it means. And they keep saying they don't have the authority to do that. They don't have the authority to annul.
Could you, that's just what one thing's funny, because I hear all the time about unions defending people who deserve to get fired, but then you don't deserve to get fired and there's no union to help you. So I guess they only help people who don't deserve it.
Yeah, that's interesting. They do, I think, generally with actual employer disputes, and my job didn't have a union, which is fine. And I don't know how much it would have helped because the employer's hands were tied. And then once I was suspended, my license was suspended anyway. Then their hands were really tied. They couldn't let me work. So I kind of get it. But the unfortunate thing was more about the DOS due process and the criminal charges.
Yeah.
Even for criminal charges, you need probable cause, which people think is a high standard. It's not high, maybe barely higher than standard for restraining orders, which is 0. All you have to do is ask for a restraining order and you get it.
Yeah.
Sure.
But this is the whole thing, though. You're already, but they've already declared you guilty, even though you haven't been tried. So then where do we go after this? It's, what? Let's go. We're up to basically March 2024 or March of this year. Where do we go after that?
Yeah. So 2025 March was those hearings on the pretrial motions and motion to dismiss. They plead the 5th because they know that they committed the felony extortion. And then July 17th, I believe, or July 13th was finally the trial. And I went up to trial and I was ready and nervous, but also excited to defend myself because I had all the truth on my side and evidence, and they had no evidence. And the accuser and the main police officer didn't show up, and the Brady violation was still outstanding because I didn't have my witness, the accuser's friend, who said he was with her the whole time. So there were many issues at the trial, and I'm at the courthouse waiting to go into the courtroom and waiting for the judge to enter the courtroom. And a lot of supporters came out to support me, which was great, even though it was far away. And right before the trial begins, my lawyer tells me, hey, the police officer's not here. I guess he didn't even know the accuser wasn't there either. And he said, so I'll move to dismiss. And I'm like, yeah, definitely. As soon as the judge walks in, before the trial technically opens, move to dismiss. And he did. And the judge dismissed it with prejudice because there was no accuser, meaning there's no case, there's no witness. So the prosecution couldn't have put on a case. The prosecution didn't object to dismissal, and they didn't appeal. And that was that. And then a few weeks later, I filed for annulment, and the state annulled all the charges and arrest and everything. So that's not on the record, except for this video. But I don't have to disclose it for like legal background check stuff. But the Department of Safety, because they believe that within their administrative stuff of the license suspension, they can't annul because they don't know if they have the authority. So it's kind of frustrating. The state can annul the charges and arrest, but the little EMS license suspension, they can't erase that from my record. They just sent me a long email saying they don't know what erase means, they don't know what null means, they don't know what vacate means. And I'm like, dude, just take it off the record. So if somebody asks, have I ever been punished for being a bad paramedic? You can say no. I'll say no, but I want, the state to say no also. I want to make sure it's erased.
Yeah. So I didn't know something like that could be on a background check. I mean,
law schools, half the law schools ask in their application if you've ever had an occupational or professional license suspended or disciplined or anything. So this
isn't something, but this isn't something, for example, that would, probably keep you out of a job or keep you out of renting an apartment, for example. They would still.
The license suspension, probably not. They might ask, but probably not. That's more of the criminal background check, which now thankfully is totally expunged and sealed and annulled. But just for law school applications, it looks bad to say, why were you suspended as a paramedic? Then I got to explain. And then even if they don't ask about charges, because most law schools do not ask applicants to disclose charges that have been annulled, but it could be snuck in because of the paramedic license issue. Then I got to explain the whole thing. So that's another interesting fine line to walk.
So and you said you've moved away from New Hampshire because of this. Is that correct?
Yes. So one of the reasons was I realized that New Hampshire has, sadly, the worst red flag laws because, like I said, the police came to my house twice because there were 2 restraining orders, and they spent 3 hours detaining me and taking all my guns and ammo. And then you have to fight to get them back, even once the restraining order expires, or I dissolved it. Once I went to court, so both times, once I actually had my hearing and I got to be before a judge, the judge dissolved the restraining order. But then you have to file a motion. It's called a motion for return of firearms. Okay. You have to go. They set a hearing date for months away. At that hearing, you have to present the judge with evidence to compel the police to give your guns back. Then if they do that, they issue the order weeks after that. Then you have to call the police station and schedule a time where there are one evidence technician. Yeah. Only one person has the key to the evidence room where they keep all the guns. And they only work once a week. So you got to find a time when then they're available and you're available to pick up your guns. So it could be another few months or a year before you even get your guns back after a restraining order, even if, again, it's dissolved because it was unfounded, it was all a mistake. You have a hearing and the judge does not issue the order. Still, you got to fight to get your guns back. And there might be a little bit of extra rust on them and scratches and stuff like that, which I had. Yeah. So I got that back with some extra rust from the police. The second restraining order was a neighbor. So after the media hit, again, I don't know if somebody sent the article to her, but she filed a restraining order also. And being a close neighbor, the order saying I couldn't be within like hundreds of feet of her house or her family or anything was not sustainable. I was a prisoner in my own house, where there was an exception for I was allowed to be in my house, but I couldn't leave my house if it meant being within 100 feet of her house, which I was because our house is abundant. So after that, this is June 2024. My wife and I realized we're going to have to move because New Hampshire has the worst red flag laws, no speedy trial rights, and these restraining orders make us not livable in our neighborhood. And we loved our house, we loved our neighborhood. But somebody apparently told my neighbor that I was a predator or dangerous or something, and they saw the media articles and just got afraid and filed a restraining order. Similarly to the first one, it didn't make an allegation of abuse or anything. Also, like, he was not afraid of me or didn't think anything negative of me a day before, and filed a restraining order, and it was approved, as they all are, without consulting me. And then I had a hearing a few days or a week later, and at the hearing, the judge dissolved it, of course, but it was too late at that point. The cops, I finally got my guns back, and the cops, right after their restraining order, again took them. So then again, I had to get the order dissolved, file a motion for return of firearms, have that hearing. At that hearing, the court invites the petitioner who filed for the motion for the restraining order, even though it's been dismissed, and they're not part of the case anymore, and they have the chance to prevent you from getting your guns back. So it's just one of the interesting things. Also, the bail conditions said I couldn't have guns, which is pretty standard.
Yeah.
But I wanted them back. I wanted my free speech back too, so I could testify, because the Defend the Guard bill was, I think, passed the House and the Senate, and people who were behind the movement were asking me to testify in the Capitol, but I couldn't because that person would be there and it would be illegal. So I wanted my rights back, and I wrote the whole motion. Lawyers said it wouldn't work, but I wrote the motion for return of firearms in the bail conditions and return of my First Amendment, which was successful. And this was early 2024, I believe, like January, February, and that motion was successful. So I got my firearms back. And one of the many arguments I made in my motion for the Second Amendment back was, even if I were convicted of all those crimes, I wouldn't lose gun rights. It's not a felony. Only felonies take away gun rights, not misdemeanors. So even though there were serious misdemeanors, even if I was convicted of all the crimes and everything, still I would have my gun rights. So how could bail conditions prior to the trial, when I'm presumed guilty, how could they take my gun rights away? So I think once the judge saw that argument, they realized the bail conditions were way too restrictive, and they amended those.
So are the Free Staters trying to do anything about some of these laws or not?
Nope. And that's one of the many disappointing things, and one of the reasons why I moved, and I think was the right decision. It's unfortunate. New Hampshire has some low taxes and some decent gun laws, but in some niche areas like red flag laws, they're under the restraining order statute under RSA 173, but they effectively are restraining orders. Anyone can call in. You can call or mail or go to the courthouse and ask for a restraining order, and you get it, and that serves as a red flag law. Cops immediately go to the house and they take all the guns and ammo by force. And if you resist, you get arrested or you get unalived. So that's another issue nobody's really working on. Somebody put in a bill, I think Tom Mannion or Matt Santostasso put in a bill, it was quickly killed to amend that part. And the speedy trial, nobody cares about either. That there's no right for misdemeanor. The Superior Court, which is where the jury trials happen for felonies and some class of misdemeanors, they have a 6-month rule where the presumption is 6 months for misdemeanors, and then it has to be dismissed if there's no trial. Yeah. But the district court, which is a bench trial with a judge, there's no rule. And the New Hampshire is one of 10 states with no state law establishing a right to a speedy trial. And there's been no good Supreme Court of New Hampshire case law for speedy trial rights. So New Hampshire has, I could say, the worst or tied for the worst speedy trial laws in the entire union. And if you don't believe in a speedy trial, you can't say you're a free stater or support freedom, because you don't even support due process, which is like foundational before freedom.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, maybe the Free Staters didn't even know about these laws. What was the reaction?
They said they don't care about the speedy trial issue.
What was the reaction of some of the people involved with the Free State Project? I mean, this person these accusers you've mentioned are apparently still going to these events, and they're still being told that they're welcome at these events. It sounds like, are they still going? I would certainly ban them from Porkfest.
Yeah, I've heard. Again, I don't follow stuff in New Hampshire for a lot of reasons, but I've heard they're not that welcome. Because again, people, almost everyone, 95%, I think, believes me that I was innocent and did not believe the allegation. So I think people have a lot of issues with the accuser because of that, and other issues too. So I don't know where they're welcome and where they're not. I don't go to those events. I think they all have their own issues. So yeah, I'm just not sure. But I think the disappointing thing, I had a lot of support from friends, but the disappointing thing is the state representatives, like a lot of Liberty legislators I've spoken to on the phone, and I said, "Do you know New Hampshire is the worst for a speedy trial?" And they didn't care. Because until you're facing prosecution, and everybody thinks they're innocent, so they never would, but you could face prosecution, you could be charged with crimes. Nobody cares until it affects them. So speedy trial is one of those issues where it's neglected, because until you're facing charges, which only a small percentage of the population will face charges and want a speedy trial, some want it delayed. But those who want a speedy trial, they empathize with me, but the state reps, some have faced charges, but most have not faced charges. So most of them do not care about it.
I would think you might get some of the gun rights organizations on this too, but it seems to me as though, a lot of people have this attitude that it just can't, it'll never happen to me. And you probably had that attitude before this happened too.
Of course, that's never happened.
To me. And now that it's happened, you're just wondering, I didn't have to do anything. You went to Virginia. Why Virginia? Jesus. But
I wanted to be as close to the swamp as I could. No. The real reason we moved, so going back to your point about gun rights, I've asked a lot of gun rights people about red flag clause, and I said, hey, Republican, Libertarian, Free State, or State Rep, do you like red flag gun confiscation? And they're like, no, I don't very much like that. In fact, I hate it. And once I explained that they have to amend RSA 173, which is titled like Order of Protection, which is restraining orders, they're like, ooh, I'm not going to touch that. No, I'm not going to make a bill to amend their restraining orders. Can't do it. Politically, is suicide. So that's the big issue. It has to be separated out and put in a different statute. If the title of the state law were red flag gun confiscation, every Republican would love to happily fight it. But the very unfortunate thing is this law happens to be under RSA 173, restraining orders. Nobody would dare touch that. Even the crazy libertarians in New Hampshire, it takes a lot of guts. So I don't blame them. It takes a lot of guts to want to amend that for reasons we all know why. So yeah, those bills would not pass until we can separate it out to a different state law, a different title. That's not going to happen. So yeah, as far as Virginia, we just simply moved. Practically speaking, my wife and I wanted to be close to family, and all our families in New York, New Jersey. We wanted to be driving distance from our parents and everything.
Yeah, I understand.
There were no states. New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, we kind of considered a little bit, but really Virginia was the only state. Maryland and New Jersey are two not free. They're like New Jersey, New York.
Maryland is horrible. Yeah, Maryland is horrible. Most of the Northeast is horrible. It really is.
So Virginia was decent until election day a week ago when Stanberger got elected. And now, honestly, Virginia is going to look essentially like Maryland and New Jersey within a very short time, I'm afraid. And now I really got to start thinking about Florida and Carolina and Tennessee. So I'm applying to law school wherever I get in. That's where I'll live for 3 years, I suppose.
Yeah.
So I'm applying all over Virginia, Florida, Carolina, but we'll see where I go. But I love Virginia. I love my neighborhood. I have a nice house. We'll see. We'll see where I get to and where I want to go.
And going to law school has been delayed how much because of this?
A year. I was going to start this August. I'm going to start next August.
Is there any chance that you could go back to being a paramedic in another state?
Oh, I'm working as a paramedic right now.
Oh, that's great. That's good. Yeah. Yep. And you've got one kid, I think you said?
Yep. We have a kid who's almost 3 and another on the way coming on Valentine's Day.
Well, that's good to know. So it sounds like to me you've got your life is kind of back, I guess he is back to normal, but it's never going to be the same again either. And you're married, so.
Yeah. My wife and I and kids survived. We're doing great considering we'll never be the same. We lost a lot of money, reputation, time, stress. But like we're grateful for a lot of the things we do have.
And how do you get this back? How do you get compensated for something like this? You don't. It's I think it has to just change how you see your neighbors and your friends and people around you.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate. I'm a very trusting person, very open. I'm still like close to all my neighbors and stuff. And my son plays with my neighbors' kids, and it's scary. I mean, a part of me can't be paranoid because I can't live that way. And I'm always
Yeah,
trying
it
to please
almost
everyone. I
yeah,
trust everyone, but it's tough.
it almost makes you sometimes wonder, think, do I just need to wear a body cam with me all the time? And so
Oh, I've thought about it.
yeah, it's really, I mean, yeah, it's and I think it just rips apart the fabric of our society with things like this. Is because we have to be able to trust each other to live together, and if nobody trusts anybody, we're all
Yep. Yeah, another one of the many things I want to see reform in is a little bit more accountability for accusers who totally fabricate accusations. The restraining order and the charges, it says right there on the document that perjury is a crime. It can be prosecuted. You can't lie. You're under oath and all that stuff. But realistically, again, what matters in practice? How many prosecutors actually bring charges for perjury? Almost never. It's like one in a billion times there's perjury prosecutors bring charges.
And they they hardly ever do anything with false rape accusers. They just don't care, and they just let it go. It's this didn't go to trial, but one thing I have heard is that actually in rape cases, women are more likely to are more likely to vote not guilty, and men are more likely to vote guilty.
Interesting.
And I've heard that from a few people, and a guy I went to high school with. He's been both a prosecutor and a public defender, so it's quite well. But well, you said you had an hour, Alu. Where can we find you out there on the web?
Yeah, there's so much more to discuss. It's a lot, but yeah, I do have to run. You can find me at aluaxelman.com, AluAxelman.com.
Yeah, and I'll put a link up to your page on Amazon too.
Yeah,
please like the video, subscribe to the channel, go buy my novel Escape from the Village, check out my Substack, and go give me money to buy me a coffee, and of course, go buy Alu's books as well. He's he's doing a lot of good work. So not sure how you find the time, Alu, but good for you that you do. So you can make back some of that lost income. Thank you, Alu. I'm Chris Baker. We're out. Buy my novel, Escape from the Village, from major booksellers online. Go to escapevillage.com. Subscribe to the Substack. Go to fountainheadforum.substack.com. Support the forum. Go to buymeacoffee.com/fountainheadforum. Thank you.